Good afternoon, Mr. Sheehan. How are you, sir?
Terrific. Busy, but terrific.
Well,
Busy and terrific, both.
well, Danny, I am super grateful for your time. I know that you're super busy. Uh, we met at the first symposium of the Soul Foundation in at Stanford the first time, and so I'm so glad to be able to speak to you again. Because in the meantime, the last 3 years, a lot of things have happened, and things
Yeah.
keep happening every day at an accelerated pace, it seems.
Yep, a lot of stuff going on, Antonio. That's good. It used to be that nobody wanted to talk about the UFO issue. The people in the House in the Senate would never discuss it. The news media didn't want to talk about it at all, except to make fun of it. So there's been dramatic progress in just the last few years.
Yeah, and now you have Dr. Phil talking about it with inside information and
Yeah,
previews coming out,
yeah.
etc.
I'm gonna be going on Dr. Phil. He called me and asked me to be on, so I've
Wow,
agreed to do that for him.
that's fantastic. So, first of all, okay, for people that follow the UFO topic, you are an absolutely well-known figure because you've been doing work on this topic for, I think, now approaching 50 years.
That's right.
Uh,
That's right.
and so, for people that don't know you, beyond the fact that you've been doing work on this topic for 50 years, you're also an Harvard educated constitutional lawyer, and you worked on some of the most consequential cases in recent American history.
Yeah,
There's a very, for many people, strange trajectory, right? But I want to ask you, with the hindsight, looking back at the history of your professional life, what is the thread that you think defines who Danny Sheehan is?
Oh, that one's pretty easy, Antonio. I mean, it has to do with unconstitutional conduct, on the part of the executive branch, almost always in the intelligence community, the national security state. It's the rise of the national security state in the United States, where the CIA, in the National Security Council, that were created by the National Security Act of 1947, have basically attempted to take over the entire constitutional government. Uh, they intimidate everybody, they threaten people, they bribe people, they sneak money from covert funds into the campaigns against people in the House and Senate who don't do what they want them to do. And what they do is they deploy the same covert activities against the congressmen and senators and citizens here in our country that they've been allowed to get away with deploying them outside the country against alleged adversaries, and so that they've now decided to bring these things home, and they're threatening the members of the House and Senate and the private citizens with downright physical violence. And they're doing it in the UFO space. They're so dedicated to concealing the knowledge they have about the UFOs and the occupants of the UFOs that they're willing to go to extreme measures to try to stop people from publicly revealing it. So I've been in the Pentagon Papers case that I did with the New York Times. It was the effort on the part of the military and the CIA to keep secret all kinds of things about the Vietnam War, their massive drug smuggling, their political assassination operations they had going, the fact that they had totally fabricated the Bay of Tonkin resolution, that they coerced and deceived Congress into passing, allowing them to send 55,000 additional troops into Vietnam. And the case that I originated off the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review was the case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources, because it's critical if you're going to try to get at the wrongdoing of the national security state and the major corporations that they're working with. You have to have insiders reveal information that they're not supposed to be telling anyone. And those are whistleblowers. And so I was the one that actually initiated the case and went all the way to the Supreme Court to establish the First Amendment right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources from disclosure to the government. So I've been at this right from the very beginning. I came out of Harvard Law School in 1970, but I had already initiated the case in 1969. I think we did it. 68, actually, we began the case. So I've been at trying to push back against the national security state and the secrets that they're concealing from Congress and from the people, prohibiting us from actually becoming involved in making policy, in a democratic government. So there's a consistent thread all the way through this. And it turns out it's not surprising that, the deepest and biggest secret that they've been trying to conceal, I would end up eventually confronting them on that. And that's what we're doing now. And I'm drafting a legislation at the request of the House Oversight Committee to insist that the Congress take control of this disclosure process, take it out of the hands of the executive branch. It has so violated any level of trust that they might have been entitled to. Also, I've drafted the whistleblower, the 15-page, along with some other lawyers that have been working with us voluntarily here at the New Paradigm Institute. We drafted the 15-page gold standard for the enhanced protection of UFO whistleblowers, explicitly designed to apply just to UFO whistleblowers, to give them this special protection that they need, given the lengths to which the national security state will go to keep this particular secret. So we've organized this entire New Paradigm Institute to work on not only those face-to-face confrontations with the executive branch and with its national security agencies, but we're also involved in the process of trying to figure out what type of changes are going to need to be made in our economic structure here on the planet, our geopolitical relations among the different nation states, how we're going to come together to address our relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization that surrounds us, and what steps are going to be taken under the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act to prosecute people who have violated a long series of crimes, in support of concealing this, embezzling billions and billions of dollars out of the defense budget that have been appropriated for other things, secretly transferring them into this reverse engineering program and the effort to physically bring down UFOs, to develop this kind of pulse weapon, this scalar weapon they've got to knock down UFOs and take them fully intact into their possession so that they can figure out how to reverse engineer them. These are all overt criminal acts. And so I'm the one that's putting together the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act criminal complaint to be filed with the Justice Department and filed by the Justice Department against them.
There's so much to unpack here, Danny. Let me try and go in a certain order.
Sure.
So first of all, you started with covering the rights of whistleblowers and the media. And now, although the line has always been that one, constitutional cases on the side of the public good, you are also representing and protecting whistleblowers in the UFO community today. So the circle closed completely after 50 years.
That's
but
right.
Beyond that, and we will talk about whistleblower protection because, for instance, you said you're writing this 15 pages, but we had just an announcement from President Trump that he indicated to the Department of War to put in place protection and waivers of NDAs for the whistleblowers that want to come forward in a secret manner and tell the Defense Department about knowledge that they might have on this topic. Although there is a lot of critique, a lot of people believe that the way is formulated right now, this proposal is maybe a trap for whistleblowers that need to go to AARO.
That's right.
Any comment on that?
Nobody trusts AARO. I mean, nobody with a political IQ above room temperature, believes that AARO is a legitimate operation. It's under the complete dominion of the War Department and Pete Hegseth, and the CIA, basically, under John Ratcliffe. So they're just doing the bidding of the national security state. So people who go into AARO to try to reveal the information to them AARO doesn't do anything at all to investigate it. What they do is they just rat them out and tell the intelligence communities, oh, this guy's come in here and is now trying to rat you out. And so that they end up getting attacked and get their security clearances challenged and everything. So no one trusts AARO anymore.
Yeah.
So they're useless. And there, of course, you're going to have Kozlowski would be on this review board, this governance board, making decisions about refusing to turn over information to the Congress.
The question is that nobody can pretend anymore that this is not an issue, and yet they still are the fundamental channel for engaging with whistleblowers and with
That's right.
people in the know,
That's right.
which basically speaks volumes about, at least for some people, myself included, about how serious they are on transparency, which is
That's right.
very little, it
That is right.
seems.
Well, not only that, but they're engaged in this aggressive campaign of
Obfuscation.
obfuscation. Yeah, that's right. I mean, they're just obfuscating. They're lying and they're pretending they're doing it. It's the old intelligence community adage: the best way to continue to conceal a secret is to pretend that you're revealing it.
Yeah.
So you reveal some little tiny aspect of it, and everybody goes, "Oh, gee, we finally found out what's going on," but they aren't. They're concealing the. I mean, you look at all four of the tranches of information that has been released so far. They're still into this mode of, "Oh, look at all these mysterious little lights distant in the sky. You can't quite tell what they are. Boy, we're really baffled about this." I mean, they have face-to-face contact with the occupants. They've interviewed them. They've got full craft in their possession, and they're just bullshitting the American public, and they're bullshitting Congress. So what's happened is the Senate Intelligence Committee has set up a whole process of basically going around AARO now, and they're taking the testimony of insiders who refuse to go to AARO because they distrust them, but to come to the Senate Intelligence Committee and to their staff, and under oath are providing information to the Senate Intelligence Committee directly. And now you'll notice that the Senate hasn't held any hearings about this. It's the House side. So the House Oversight Committee is the one leading the way, basically, on this. And they've appointed, as you know, this special task force that has responsibility for declassifying information, revealing secrets that the executive branch has kept from Congress. So it's the Congress that we need to stand up and to take the leadership role in really getting at this information and deciding what's going to be made available to the public and how rapidly this will happen. And very importantly, what steps need to be taken legislatively in order to adjust our economy, our geopolitical relationships with other nation states and everything on our planet, what our relationship is to the United Nations, to come to grips with our relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization. This all has to be done by Congress.
Yeah. And let's take a step back, because this is something, I mean, for people that know nothing about this topic or that are starting to look into it because now it's official, we have a website that is being published by the official Department of War with a lot of videos and documents declassified, although a lot of people call it a nothing burger because there's nothing new about it, etc., etc. But if you're not familiar with this topic, the vast majority of people think that this is nonsense or close to nonsense. But then we have, on the other side, government task forces and departments, etc., and the White House involved that for decades have contemplated how to reveal the secret to the public. We know about the initiative under Bush. I'll talk about it, how they met scientists, politicians, intelligence people, sociologists, etc., to decide whether or not to disclose and what would be the consequences. So serious people are not discussing whether or not this thing is real, but they're discussing how do we tell the public without collapsing society? How do we advance
without collapsing their authority?
Exactly.
over
Yeah. I
over
mean,
the
I'm talking
society.
about the official
Yeah, right,
narrative. Then we know
right.
that there is
Yeah.
something else behind it, right? And now what's happening is that for the last 4 or 5 years, Congress passed serious legislation year after year on this topic, signed by the president, by multiple presidents, both Democrats and Republican. And we had hearings with whistleblowers under oath talking about it. So there's a real big dissonance between these two sides, these two perception of reality.
Mhm.
To people that are new to this, what would you say to explain the gravity of the situation, the importance of this moment?
Well, it's got two dimensions. One is sort of simply planetary, that on our planet itself, the United States government has gotten to be so out of control and so under the domination of the executive branch that you can see a person like Donald Trump come into office and as the president, and you can see the extraordinary abuses that he can engage in, with Congress just sort of standing by helplessly. Here he is bombing the crap out of Iran, and both the House and the Senate have passed laws telling him he can't do that, and he just keeps right on doing it in defiance of them. And the military is going along with what he's telling them to do. The CIA and the intelligence communities are going along with it because they're the ones that support doing exactly what he's proposing doing. So this is a major constitutional crisis that we're looking at here, that the national security state has risen into a position of power that they're basically atrophying the Congress of the United States, and now they have manipulated the judicial process so that they've gotten people put onto the courts now that were explicitly put there to load up the authority of the executive branch. That's what's happened here. This entire Federalist Society has appointed dozens and dozens and dozens of judges now that have been the only time that they oppose what Trump and the executive branch are doing is under extraordinarily extreme situations where he's gone to such incredible where for example Trump and the executive branch were trying to eliminate American citizenship because you're born in the United States.
Mm.
I mean, it's right in the Constitution in complete black and white, and they went to the point of insisting that they were going to take it away from the people being born here. And under those extreme circumstances, Justice Roberts and actually Coney Bryant have joined with Kagan and Sotomayor and Brown Jackson to give them a 5-4 majority vote. They got a concurrence out of Kavanaugh, on this, but it's only under the most extreme circumstances has the court attempted to intervene in any way. They've succumbed to the assertion of power on the part of the executive branch. So, from a strictly planetary point of view, that situation is extraordinarily dangerous right now. Now, moving to the larger kind of galactic level of this, what's happened now is because of this ever increasing power on the part of the executive branch, they have taken measures against people inside the government and private citizens. They've taken actions to punish and deter people from coming to grips with the UFO issue. The executive branch has gone even so far with the CIA and the Defense Department. They have actually engaged in a covert psychological operation designed to deal with their adversaries abroad and directed it toward Congress and the United States citizens. That they've engaged in this major propaganda campaign to try to convince people that anybody who believes that UFOs are real is mentally ill and actually deserves to be incarcerated in a mental institution. They've moved to get people put into mental institutions. They've ruined people's private home family lives by convincing their friends and family that they're mentally ill to get them committed. They've lost their jobs. This is the lengths to which the national security state has gone in abusing the citizenry and abusing the Constitution in the name of concealing this ultimate secret that they've got. They believe that their ability to get exclusive control over the energy source of the UFOs and the anti-gravity propulsion systems have caused them to go to such extraordinary lengths that they're actually brainwashing through a technical series of skills that they've been allowed to develop to use against their adversaries. They're using them against the American public. So the most important thing to tell the average person is that if you have an instinctive reaction when someone talks about the reality of UFOs, to go, whoa, this person must be a little bit nutty, you're being brainwashed. You're actually being manipulated by the national security state into helping them conceal this reality. Okay, so we've mounted this major counteroffensive here over the last few years to try to get people, the citizenry, to understand this. And now the latest polls show that upwards of 66% of the people in the United States are convinced that UFOs are real.
Yeah.
But they still don't dare talk about it.
Yeah.
They're afraid that their business associates or their school people or their family members are going to ridicule them and think that they're mentally unstable. So people haven't gotten out from under this kind of psyops operation that's going on the part of the executive branch. So these are the planetary concerns, which are constitutional in scope, but then there's the galactic concerns about the fact that they're keeping the people from knowing about this entire. I mean, how preposterous can you imagine this to be? That they think that it's their job to keep concealed the fact that there's an entire extraterrestrial civilization, all around. And it's a crime to try to find out about it.
Yep. And I mean, this is another point that looking back at your trajectory professionally fits perfectly with everything that you've done. So in all the cases that you've been involved with, you've been facing people that did sometimes unspeakable things, but under the umbrella of I'm a patriot, I love my country, I do this for my country.
That's right.
And everybody is the hero of their own story. Nobody is ever the villain. So the commando that killed Kennedy, they were patriots because Kennedy was a traitor of the country. The CIA that smuggled cocaine to finance illegal assassination plots were patriots because they love their country. And at the end of the day, instead, the only thing that counts is the rule of law, domestic and international. It doesn't matter if you think you're a patriot when you actually break the Constitution constantly and break the law constantly. You're simply a something else. You're simply a criminal. Exactly. You're simply a criminal.
That's what you are. And that's the national security thing. They just wave the flag of national security at you, and then hide under it. And the judges let them get away with it. The people in Congress are afraid to do anything to them about it. Like Frank Church, who chaired the famous Church Committee that was a Senate Joint Committee to investigate intelligence abuses, the assassination program and the smuggling programs, drug programs. His very next election, millions of dollars showed up mysteriously in the campaign against him, revealing publicly the fact that he supported the Equal Rights Amendment up in Idaho. And he supported some restriction on fully automatic military weapons in the hands of civilians. And that money came directly out of the Nugan Bank in Australia, which was drug money that was deposited there by the CIA station chief in Saigon, because he was providing security cover for Vang Pao, the major opium trafficker in Laos. And that money was being put in the Nugan Bank. And that's where they drew the money out of to get rid of Senator Frank Church. And they did the same thing for the senator from Iowa. And they did the same thing for the senator from Indiana. They ousted them from office because they opposed covert activities on the part of the CIA. So the people in the House and Senate know this. They
Yeah.
know that, that they're subject to being attacked by the national security state. So this is a major problem that has come to a head with regard to the UFO issue because so many people want to know, insist upon knowing about what's going on with the UFOs.
Yeah.
And there's an extraterrestrial civilization all around us. We want to know about it so we can all participate together in figuring out how to relate to them. So
Hopefully
that
not in war, not with weapons,
not in
not
war,
with
but that's the only way that the national security state knows how to deal with anybody who doesn't succumb to the domination by the United States. I mean,
but this is the
their job as they articulate it themselves in the 1992 United States Defense Department policy planning guidance document, the Defense Department asserted in a classified document their mission was to secure and maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials needed by basically our major corporations. Because they view that what's good for General Motors is good for the country. If
yeah.
you can get all the resources to give to the corporations, they hire people, they give people jobs, they pay taxes, they stimulate the economy. And so that everything is done to benefit, to put the instrumentalities of our government at the disposal of the interests of privately owned corporations.
This is a touchy subject for Americans, especially when a foreigner talks about their country. I understand I'm Italian. I believe that my country is not an independent democracy. We've always been controlled by the CIA. We had the biggest communist party outside of USSR after the war. We've always been split and manipulated. So I'm not saying this from the perspective of we're better or in any sense, but it's clear for anybody that look at the history of the United States and you tell their history in an incredible, detailed way, that the United States is not a democracy,
Right.
is a corporative based, let's say, oligarchy. I would say.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. And
eh,
we've got to solve that. I mean, and then, we're the only 4% of the population. The American citizens are only 4% of the population of the whole planet. We're uniquely situated to do something about this,
yeah,
to basically oust these people from control over our constitutional government, and to take it over and have a social democratic government, that serves the interests of the people rather than serves the interests of the major corporations and their private stockholders, who are mostly super rich people. And it's now become transparent not only with the Trump administration uniquely, but also over the UFO issue. It's become totally clear that what their objective is to keep this secret so that they can get licenses. The private aerospace corporations can get patents on the technology so that they can license it to the United States government. So every time we want to use one of the propulsion systems or any of the other technology that's recovered, our United States government has to pay tax money to the private corporations to use it.
after they have paid billions and billions and billions and billions for R&D research
That's
and
right.
development of that technology in the first place, right?
And gave them the
Mm.
technology,
Yeah.
brought the UFOs down and put them into their possession, and now they're insisting that they belong to them. I mean, what I'm saying is that this is a subtext of the entire UFO issue, and that we have a better chance now of coming to grips with this fundamental constitutional challenge that we have in under the aegis of the UFO issue, because there's such a huge percentage of the people that realize how bad it is what they've done here with regard to the UFO issue. So that's
And
why we're talking about it.
to give another layer to the people looking that don't know much about this, connected to your story, bring us back to then 1977 because you started
Uh-huh.
this journey in an official capacity for President Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, this began when Jimmy Carter was elected on November 4th of 1976, and by November 19th, he had decided that the first thing he really wanted to do was to get briefed on the UFO issue, because he had seen a UFO when he was governor of Georgia. He had been at a Lions Club meeting, a rural Lions Club meeting, and the other guys went out on the veranda, to smoke cigarettes at a break, and a UFO came. And it wasn't like some distant light in the sky bouncing around like they've disclosed in the UFO disclosure. So this was a UFO that was at treetop level, less than a football field length away from them. I mean, so there wasn't any question about what it was. And so then Governor Carter was there. He reported it to NICAP. He called the local Air Force base and reported it. And when he became president, one of the very first things he tried to do is to get briefed on it. So he sent for the head of the Central Intelligence Agency to come down to Plains, Georgia, before he'd even gone up to Washington, and ask him to come down to his private home and brief him on the UFO issue. Well, it turns out that the head of the CIA at that point in time, that had been appointed by Gerald Ford, who was filling in temporarily when Richard Nixon got impeached and thrown out, and Gerald Ford had brought in George Bush Sr. to try to protect the CIA against the Church Committee investigation. And so George Bush refused to give him the information. George Bush flew down to Plains, Georgia, and told the president-elect, he said, "You have no need to know this information." And he refused to give it to him. And so what President Carter did is President Carter contacted the Democratic head of the House Science and Technology Committee and had him task the Congressional Research Service with doing a major investigation to find out what documents and what evidence we had inside the government about the reality of the UFO phenomenon. So what they tasked the Congressional Research Service, which is this fairly large and muscled up investigative and research group. And I got a call from Dr. Marcia Smith, who was the head of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service. She contacted me in my capacity as general counsel for the United States Jesuit headquarters. I was general counsel in their social ministry office, which is their public policy office. And so she contacted me and asked if I would become a special counsel to the investigation. And first thing she wanted me to do, she wanted me to contact the Vatican as general counsel for the Jesuit order, its policy office, and see if we could get access to the Vatican archives to determine what the Vatican had about the UFO phenomenon and extraterrestrial intelligence, and be able to share that with President Carter. So I contacted the Vatican and explained to them what we wanted, and they said no. They wouldn't give it to us. So I was kind of surprised, actually. So I wrote them a second letter saying, "I don't think you quite understand what we're doing here." And they, well, it turns out they did understand, and they still didn't want to do it. So the next thing that Marcia Smith wanted me to do, it turns out that the Congress, the new Congress that had come in with Jimmy Carter, the House of Representatives had cut out half of the budget for SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And she wanted me to accompany the astronauts as Jesuit counsel to go with them to speak with the individual members of the House of Representatives to get them to reinstate the full budget for the SETI program. I got permission from my superiors at the Jesuit headquarters to do that. We went and visited them all, and they reinstated the entire full budget for them. So then Marcia Smith contacted me and said, the top 50 scientists at SETI would like to have you come out and give them a closed-door 3-hour seminar on the theological implications of contact with an intelligent species outside of our planet.
Let's pause here for a second, because a personal question. So before all of this, and then while this was unfolding, what was going through your mind in terms of what am I doing looking at the UFOs? Were you already into the subject before? When did you get the haha moment saying, "Oh, this is real, this is serious"?
Well, I'd always, from the time that I was a child, when I first learned what stars were, the stars were suns of another solar system in our galaxy. And I said, oh, that means that there are planets actually orbiting these other stars, and there must be people on them. And so I was always intrigued by basically how absurd it was about what we were doing to each other down here on the planet in light of this scope of what was really going on. And it seems so stupid and incongruous. So that had always kind of motivated me. And so I decided I was going to be an astronomer to actually study about all this stuff. And then I realized that had way too much math in it, and I didn't like that. So I decided I was going to be an astronaut. So basically, as soon as I found out that they were creating a United States Air Force Academy, which they were setting it up in the mid 1950s, I said, okay, I'm going to go to the Air Force Academy and become an astronaut. And that way I'll get to go out into outer space and get to meet these other civilizations. So that was all very much what I was into. And I ended up being the number one candidate for the senatorial nomination from New York State by 1963 when I graduated from high school. So I went to meet with Jacob Javits, who was the United States Senator. And when he asked me why I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, I told him, I wanted to be an astronaut. He said, oh, yes, all young boys want to be an astronaut now that John Glenn has gone around the Earth. I said, no, I've always wanted to be an astronaut. I said, so why do you want to be an astronaut? I said, look, this is the most extraordinary period in our human history. We're getting set during my lifetime to go out into outer space and get to meet all of these other civilizations out there. I said, I want to participate in this. And he looked at me and he said, you actually believe that there's other living intelligent life out in the universe? And I said, well, sure I do. I said, you're a United States Senator. I said, you must know that too. And he was so flabbergasted. He was so flabbergasted in the meeting that he got kind of flustered. And he said, well, look, I hadn't really expected this. And he said, I guess I need to level with you, Dan. He said, look, I've already given the appointment to the Air Force Academy to the son of my principal financial supporter for my Senate races. He said, that's the way it really goes up here, Danny Sheehan. He said, look, so what I'll do, I'll give you my appointment to the Naval Academy. And I said, I'm not into boats, I'm into fly airplanes, be an astronaut. Oh, no, you can be a pilot too in the Navy. And I said, no, I'm not into all the boat stuff. And he said, okay, look, well, all you have to do is go back to your congressman. There were 40 congressional districts in New York at the time. He said, you can get your nomination from your local congressperson. He says, who's your congressperson? I said, it's Carlton King. He said, oh, I know Carlton King. I'll give him a call and I'll tell him to give you his appointment to the Air Force Academy. So turns out Carlton King gave the appointment to the kid who was number 7 in our congressional district, who happened to be the son of the Republican mayor of Glens Falls, who basically washed out at the Air Force Academy when he went. So I just said, look, I'm going to have to become a lawyer. I said, because our government, this isn't the way this is supposed to be running here. So I'm going to have to become a lawyer and spend some time trying to figure out how to retune our government to get it back into tune. But when I actually went to Harvard College and went to Harvard Law School and graduated from Harvard Law School and got out into the world doing the Pentagon Papers, doing the Watergate burglary case with Lee Bailey's firm, what I started finding out is, oh, it looks like our government isn't just a little out of tune. It's playing an entirely different song than we've been taught, and so somebody's got to do something about this. And so I stayed with it, but I always kept on working on the UFO thing. Whenever it came up, I became a lawyer for John Mack at Harvard University, because he knew about my service as as special counsel to the investigation by President Carter. So I not only served as his attorney when we were confronting the Harvard faculty committee that was trying to basically revoke his tenure over publishing a book about UFOs, and contact experiences that people had. And then I became general counsel to his Project for Extraordinary Experience Research. He set up in Cambridge after he got all these charges dismissed against him, and so for 10 years, from 1994 to 2004, I served as general counsel. So I got to interview all kinds of people. I did the vetting actually for John Mack as to which of these people are really credible. As an attorney, talented in doing interviews and deciding what witnesses you're going to put on in front of a jury, et cetera. I said, look, here are the people that are credible. These other people are not credible. They're either a little mentally ill or they're seeking celebrity or something. And some of them I just don't believe. I said, it's possible that they may be telling you, but I don't affirmatively believe them. So I wouldn't put them in front of a jury, but here are the ones who are. And so I got to actually talk to all of these kind of people. And when you're talking to a person who is absolutely, totally convincing that they've had a face-to-face encounter with an extraterrestrial being, and got taken aboard a UFO, you start to become more and more certain that this is true. Plus, when I had been serving with the special investigation for the Congressional Research Service, the Congressional Research Service, Dr. Marcia Smith asked me, "What's the first thing you want to see?" And I said, "I want to see the classified portions of Project Blue Book." She was surprised that I even knew what Blue Book was. But I knew about Project Blue Book from 1952 all the way to 1969, and so I wanted to see the classified portion because I knew that there were hundreds of cases that they were concealing, and trying to cover this thing up. And so she said, "Oh, they're never going to let us have any of that." And I said, "Well, look we're not going to get it if you don't ask. So, you're the Congressional Research Service. Ask them if I tell them who I am and ask them if I can get access to the classified portions." And much to her surprise, they agreed. so they brought the classified sections of the Project Blue Book up to Washington, and they put them in the Madison building, a brand new building that had just been built. There wasn't even anybody in it. It was completely unoccupied, but they brought the records there down in the basement, and I got to go see them. And in my review of those, I saw actual photographs, U.S. official government classified photographs of UFO or UFO recovery. Yeah. There wasn't any doubt about what it was. And because there was snow on the field, and so I knew it wasn't Roswell, which happened in July of 1947. So the bottom line is I ended up, being able to trace the symbols that were on the bottom of the dome of this crashed UFO. And I traced them right out on the reverse part of the back part of the yellow pad like this, I traced them because they told me not to take any notes or anything. And so what I did is I just traced the symbols all along the bottom of the dome, and I brought them back to Jesuit headquarters. And I showed them to Father Bill Davis, who was my superior. I was a candidate for the Jesuit priesthood at the time. So I showed him to my superior, and his response was he bent down and slid open the drawer of his desk, and he pulled out this little 8.5 by 11 manila folder with those little bronze clasps on, and he handed it to me. So I unclasped it, and I pulled out an 8.5 by 11 black and white photograph of a UFO in flight. And I said, "Bill, where did you get this?" He said, "I got it from my sister Dodie." And I said, "Oh, your sister Dodie, how did she get it?" He said, "Oh, she got it from Mike, her husband, who's the chief air traffic controller at the Seattle airport." And I said, "Well, where did Mike get it?" He said, "Oh, his best friend is a cargo pilot that flies cargo all around the Northwest. He took this photograph right out of the window of his plane."
And he was at the time was no computer, digital cameras, AI. Those were actual photographs.
Wasn't any of that stuff. In fact, he had to bring it to the drugstore to get it developed. That's how it was back at that time. So he gets the thing developed, and as soon as he saw what he had, he didn't want to get in trouble. So he wasn't going to report it to the officials. So what he did, he said, "I'm going to take it and give it to my best friend, who's the head of the air traffic controllers there in Seattle." And so he gives it to Mike. Mike didn't want to get in trouble, so he wasn't going to report it. So he took it and gave it to his wife, Dodie. And he said, "Here, bring this and give this to your brother. He's a priest."
Yeah. Considering the time, it makes perfect sense.
So that was what I said. I said, "Look, there it is. Here I have been given access to the classified portions of the book. There's the photographs of them recovering a UFO. Wasn't any doubt about what it was. But what I knew now as a lawyer, here's direct evidence. Here's demonstrable evidence that you could put in front of a jury to show them that this was going on." So I knew that I was now in possession of that kind of evidence. And then when I later, in 1994, when I was John Mack's attorney and I interviewed all these different people, I had all of those people as witnesses that I could put in front of a jury. And then I was contacted by Dr. Stephen Greer in 2000 or so, and asked if I would vet all kinds of people that he had interviewed, because we were getting set to introduce these people in the National Press Club in May of
Washington
2001.
D.C.
Okay. And so I was the one in charge of vetting the potential witnesses to decide which 24 witnesses were going to present to the National Press Club. And that's so I became general counsel for Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project, for 20 years, and had all kinds of contact with people and interviewed all kinds of people. Clifford Stone, for example, sergeant in the Air Force that was part of the recovery teams. They would go out to crashes of UFOs. And when he's sitting here, a grown man, an officer or a sergeant in the Air Force, crying, telling me about the time he was holding the hand of an ET person that had crashed in one of these, dying, and he was there with him, and the ET was communicating with him telepathically, dying.
Yeah.
Now that's not a story you make up, you know. And so the bottom line is that I was completely convinced it was true. So when I was contacted later by Lue Elizondo,
Yeah.
when Lue had released the videos and stuff to the New York Times, and the Pentagon went after him, lying like mad. Susan Go and the other people saying, "Oh, we don't know who Louis Elizondo is. We have no records of him. He has no contact with the government." He wanted to file a complaint with the Inspector General of the Defense Department, so he reached out and contacted me and asked me to become his attorney to help work with him on this complaint. So what we did is we drafted the complaint for the Inspector General of the Defense Department, and it was a lot more than just a narrow complaint about them lying about Lue. Lue was insistent that we charge them with lying to Congress and
Yeah.
lying to the American people and engaging in this kind of unconstitutional program of brainwashing the American people about this. And so we did. And so we filed that complaint with them. And all of a sudden, the Inspector General became aware of the fact that they were being lied to. In the whole Defense Department, a lot of them were being lied to about this thing by this legacy group, and the wheels started coming off. And that's what happened. So that's how it started. And that we proceeded to then go over and start meeting with people over in the Senate Intelligence Committee to begin with, and started to bring witnesses into the Senate Intelligence Committee staff so that they could interview them under oath and be given the information. So people who were directly involved in the reverse engineering, people that were directly involved in trying to force the UFOs down and to capture them, could come to the Senate Intelligence Committee and tell them in first person under oath about it. And then that triggered the House of Representatives to get involved in starting to have the hearings. And so that's how I got to meet Eric Burleson, who had responsibility for doing this. We worked all together to get we were originally trying to get a whole subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee set up to review all of this. It had subpoena power and everything else. Well, Comer wouldn't do that. James Comer, who's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, he said, "What I'll do is we'll set up a task force, and we'll assign, the task force people." So they assigned seven Republicans and 5 Democrats to this task force on the declassification of U.S. government. So that's where we are now. So that's how I got here. That's how I became convinced. So sort of the aha moment. The aha moment, actually, some might think it must have been when I saw the photographs in the classified portion of Blue Book. No, the aha moment was when I realized what stars were.
Okay.
That was it. Aha. Okay, now we got it. This is a life mission to get to meet with these ET people and help coordinate our planet, so we stop doing these really dumb things to each other.
Yeah.
And that's the mission.
I understand. And again, there are a couple of, I want to open up a small parenthesis, a personal one. So you started, so you've been always, I assume, very religious, but
Yes.
and now 50 years from when you started looking into the UFO subject?
Yeah.
Has that changed? Has that evolved? And how has that evolved? If so, dealing with this phenomenon?
Well, I have to admit that one of the things that surprised me, I mean, as I was following the information, even as a child, all the way on up through before I became professionally involved in it, I had seen the indications that the ET people communicate telepathically, because I'd followed the Betty and Barney Hill story, right? Uh, and I saw, oh, they engage in telepathic communication. And then Betty Hill talked about how they'd unlocked the door of the car kind of psychically, and that they just lifted up, just held out their hand on, and she came right up off the ground, and they kind of carried her along. And they were not walking on the ground, they were kind of gliding along, so they levitate. Uh, so we had the information about them telepathically communicating, levitating. That was all I had until I started working with the Lue Elizondo. And then I began to realize that the psychic capabilities of the ETs were dramatically more expansive and profound than we had thought about before. We'd always thought about the flying saucers flying around, and wouldn't it be great to get to go to their planet and all, but this other capacity that they have, it turns out becomes central to how it is they travel. I had this big long discussion with Carl Sagan at dinner one night, and he kept saying, "Well, I'm sure that they have billions and billions of these other star systems, and I'm sure there's life out there, but it doesn't make any difference because they can't get here, and we can't get there because you can't go faster than the speed of light, and like they're 4 million light years away, so that that we're never going to have, we aren't even going to be able to communicate with them." And so that once I started realizing that these ET beings, one of the faculties of extra sensory perception in psychic capabilities is astral travel.
Yeah.
And because of my time at Jesuit headquarters and study, I was at Harvard Divinity School too. After Harvard College and Harvard Law School and going out and practicing for a few years, I ended up going back to do my PhD work at Harvard, in the field of comparative social ethics. And I was at the Divinity School studying under Dr. Ralph Potter, who teaches the courses on comparative social ethics. And so that I started studying about the different religious traditions and realized that the avatars of virtually all of the ancient religious traditions, not just Christianity, but the Judaism and Islam and Buddhists and Hindus, they all rose up around an avatar who was displaying these kind of capabilities, that could walk on water by levitating, could transmute water into wine, could manifest fishes and loaves, but it was going on in all these other religions as well. So I realized that even though the Christian church, the Catholic Christian church, was adamant about the fact that only Jesus could do this, it was perfectly clear that wasn't true, that there were all these other avatars that were doing it too. And I started recognizing the similarity between the avatars of the traditional religions of our human family here on our planet and these capabilities that were being demonstrated by the ETs. So I wrote an article for Open Minds magazine with John Rawls, or excuse me, with John Rao, about the common consciousness that we shared with these ET beings, and that even the highest evolutionary state of our human family in the avatars, were similar to what they are, and so that this offered great hope, that we could have positive relations with them, and that the likelihood is that they had an elevated consciousness that was similar to our avatars, and that they would be supportive of the peaceful relations with ourselves and each other. So that it opened up this entire other dimension of my interest in the UFO phenomenon, because it coincided with the entire religious studies that I was doing, because I knew that it was the religious social ministry offices of all of the 54 major religious denominations in our country that are most supportive of social justice issues, which is what I was working on all the time. I've now reached out to the some of the leadership of the major religious institutions to start meeting with them now to get them prepared to update all of their theology, to start to include the reality of the UFO phenomenon, the reality of the extraterrestrial civilization around us that is non-human, non-Homo sapien, and that this is an absolutely extraordinarily exciting period where we're going to be kind of amending in a very positive way and supplementing all of our human knowledge, not only in the area of science and physics, but in the areas of theology and philosophy, in sociology, for that
Yeah.
matter.
And here comes another pushback from institutions, right? As
Oh,
well.
sure. Yeah. But, we're used to all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
every single case I've ever done over a 50-year period, the established order was always on the other side of every case we ever did, and we won every single one of them, except for the Iran-Contra case, where the judge uh, ended up being a member of the board of directors of Meyer Lansky's National Bank of Miami, the big mob bank that was working with the CIA to help fund covert operations against Cuba, and he plowed us under. But the bottom line is we've been consistently successful in confronting this national security state, and so I think if we maintain an upward, positive, forward kind of narrative here about what we're doing, trying to bring all of our religious traditions up to date, to understand that our human family is evolving biologically, toward the next iteration of our species. I mean, we've come all the way from Australopithecus, to coming down out of the trees as some descendant of the apes, onto the plains of the Serengeti. It would have Homo erectus and then Homo habilis and Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal, and now Homo sapien. And we're right on the verge of evolving into the next biological stage of our human family. And that's
I
what
agree with you.
that's what these avatars are. They're precursors of which are only like 3 to 4 to 5,000 years ago. But this is a comparatively recent manifestation. This new faculty that we're developing, which is relegare, the relinking. That's what the Latin root of religion is
Yeah.
relegare. Okay, and so that we're relinking, overcoming the impetus on us of our intellect. We're so proud that the Homo sapien is distinguished from Neanderthal by the development of the frontal lobes that developed the intellect. Well, the Latin root of intellect is intellectus, which is the ability to distinguish the difference between. And so that intellect is it evolved in our species biologically, generated a sense of separateness from everything else. And it gave us the ability to distinguish one thing from another, to form mathematics, to figure out relationships to each other, to manipulate material reality around us, and has been of great benefit to us as a species. But the fact is, it dwarfed our ability to experience the unitive phenomenon that bonds the whole universe together into a unitive, harmonious whole.
Yeah.
And that's what the religious experience is. Setting aside all the institutional distortions, and the doctrines that are established that are rooted like 2,000 years ago, when 99% of the people couldn't even read. I mean, and the churches developed these kind of doctrines for simple-minded people who didn't even go more than 50 miles away from the place where they were born in their whole life. And institutions ossify, and they turn rigid. And that's what the problem is. The Roman Catholic Church has gotten ossified. That obviously John the 23rd invoked and created the Vatican II to try to get over that. To get unossified. And you see, there's a whole compendium of the bishops and cardinals that are fighting it like mad. They still won't accept Vatican II. they they
I
won't.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is privileged information, and I don't know if you can comment on it.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, and for a long time, there was maybe a couple of years ago, uh, in parallel to the disclosure process that was unfolding in Washington, there was a letter that was leaked to a paper but I don't honestly know whether it was a fake, it was fabricated or not.
Yeah.
That talked about an effort of the Jesuits to push for the inclusion of reincarnation in the Catholic doctrine as a result of this opening, this evolution, even because of what we learned from contact with NHIs.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Do you have an idea on that?
Yeah, I do have an idea that back in 1977, our Jesuit headquarters presented an official proposal to the National Council of Churches to set up a joint task force of the 54 religious denominations that are members of the National Council of Churches, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, and the Jesuit Order to start preparing the theology that would include an extraterrestrial civilization. So we began that process back right then, and have remained steadfast in that position. And that requires us to look back at the Council of Nicaea, in 325 is where they renounced reincarnation. Not only that, but they renounced Gnosticism. The ability for human beings to have a direct unitive relationship. Okay, and to superimpose the institution of the church in between the individual and the numinous experience, saying that was heretical to try to believe that you could have a direct relationship to the infinite and eternal. You had to go through the church. And the church was, of course, serving in the interest of the state religion for Rome, to try to have just everybody be loyal Roman citizens. And that infected the entire doctrines of the church to get rid of reincarnation. It was perfectly clear that the early Christian church believed in reincarnation. You remember in the Gospels when Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do people say I am?" And they say, "Oh, some people say that you're Elijah. Come back to," and the others kind of hypothesize different people. He was a reincarnation of, right? And all the Hindus believe in the reincarnation. The Buddhists believe in reincarnation. The fact is, the evidence is kind of overwhelming now for people who are recalling past lives, under regressive hypnotherapy, and getting into details of who they were and where they lived and who their kids were and who their mates were, and people are going to those places and finding out that it's true, whatever all that is. And so the bottom line is that the Jesuit order was created back in 1540 for the purpose of reforming and updating the Catholic Church. That's the assignment that Ignatius had, back in 1540. Now, at that time, it was a desire to kind of forestall the Protestant Reformation. But the Jesuits under Pedro Arrupe, at least, who became the superior general of the Jesuits in 1963, he was a very progressive, a surgeon, a medical doctor in Spain, a Spanish Basque. Like Ignatius was a Spanish Basque, right? And Pedro Arrupe, reinstated this desire to kind of update the Catholic Church to do what the Jesuit mission really was all about. So that's where this comes from. There was a thing called the 32nd General Congregation documents. This was in 1972. That Pedro Arrupe, the Jesuit Superior General, convened all 100 of the provincials, usually one provincial per country, but they brought them all together into Rome and issued the 32nd General Congregation documents, calling for the Jesuit order to mobilize to update the Catholic Church. And we had passed a resolution out of the Jesuit headquarters declaring the mere possession of nuclear weapons to be a mortal sin, because they're intrinsically designed to annihilate civilian populations. which is a complete violation of the just war theory. And Brian Hare worked up the whole thesis for us. With the Jesuit order out of our headquarters, presented this to the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops. We twisted their arms until they agreed to this. We got that approved. Then we got the National Board of Homeland Ministry, the United Methodist Church, to agree to this. The Reagan administration was doing backflips over this. But so that this movement, what I'm saying is this, I can put it this way, this letter that you're talking about would be completely consistent with the primacy of the Jesuit order being involved in attempting to go back to understanding some of the essential mystical aspects of Gnosticism, which includes reincarnation.
Do you think that this is going to be a fundamental part of disclosure of reality of this new expanded reality that we're about to face as humanity?
Yes, I do. And I think that the Jesuit order has to take a leading role, cutting edge role in getting the church to disclose information. We've succeeded in meetings with Cardinal Peter Turkson, who used to be the head of the Pontifical Commission on Social Justice, to actually get Francis to renounce the doctrine of discovery. That was that 1492 papal bull that was issued declaring that indigenous people are not human. They don't have any soul, and therefore it's perfectly appropriate to take their land. And that the Roman Catholic Church endorsed the seizure of the lands of Aboriginal people, and they refused to denounce it. They would say, "Oh, we don't do it anymore. It wasn't a good idea." But they didn't dare renounce it because of the concept of papal infallibility. And that how could a pope be infallible if they'd issued this papal bull if you're going to overturn it? But finally, under significant pressure, I met with Peter Turkson about this, and others, and finally, Francis finally officially renounced and set aside the papal bull. And so that there's openness now. And Leo was a close personal friend of Francis, is very compatible with him, and in fact has taken the name Leo the 14th for a reason, because Leo the 13th, who was Pope from like 1878 to 1903, is the one who established the Papal Observatory. Actually, at Castle Gandolfo, and actually set up these things called the Lyonese Commission to examine St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, studying their discussions of human consciousness.
Yeah.
Right.
I know that I'm taking a lot of your time. I don't know if you need to go, if you have a hard stop, last question, or you have more time. You tell me.
No, I've got another 15 minutes or so. We're good.
So, okay, then let me ask you a personal question.
Sure.
A lot of people say when you start looking into the phenomenon looks back. And you've been looking at the phenomenon for 50 years.
Yeah.
Has the phenomenon looked back? Have you experienced anything?
I've not. I've never seen a UFO. I've never had any contact with an ET. I've never, I've interviewed lots and lots of people who have both things, but I've never encountered them at all. And a lot of it requires me opening up to it. One of the main things that we know about all of this is that you have to kind of open your heart to them, to open it up, to allow them to communicate with you. And as a lawyer, I've always been kind of overprotective of my own intellectual processes, and I'm sure it's a failing on my part, but it hasn't happened yet.
I understand that. So let's go back to disclosure. And you were talking about how the government has manipulated our perception to convince us that this topic is nonsense and is not worth serious attention from serious people.
And is evidence of mental illness.
Exactly.
Very specific.
Something strange. I mean, I see something strange happening right now in the modern disclosure process. So we've seen that a lot of things have been destigmatized because we have serious people now, scientists, academics, military people, etc., talking about it. But at the same time, it seems that another type of stigma is being pushed on the population, which is you can approach this topic only if you look at what the government says, the military personnel says,
Mm.
the intelligence community says. And on the other side, and you've been talking about all the people that you've interviewed that had contact, etc.
Yeah.
There are probably now millions of people that have direct experiences and contact with entities, with UFOs, etc., etc. And yet,
Mm.
those are not part of the conversation yet.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is? And is this just a phased approach? Is that opening happening, or
Yeah.
that is a hard block right now?
That's an excellent question, Antonio. Yeah. Yeah. The answer is that yes, that now that we're getting past the stigma of recognizing that UFOs are real, and even now engaging in the conversation about their being here. Not just that but that they're here on the planet. That the people are now starting to say, well, wait a second. What about all these people that have been talking about having these direct face-to-face experiences with the ETs? Doesn't that mean that now it's probable that some of them at least are telling the truth? And so it's starting to dawn on people now. But the military and the Congress people are just completely closed-minded about this. They just don't dare start talking to the experiencers themselves. So we're in the process now of talking with people about setting up a special program at the New Paradigm Institute to deal directly with the experiencers, to have them organized in a comprehensive organization so that they can work with each other, share information, and can be represented in an official way, and get a chance to actually present evidence to Congress. It's an entire other dimension of knowledge other than just the reverse engineering program, in the technology having to do with the craft. That's all that they're talking about right now. And so that this is a thing that is very much on the burner right now. In fact, I'm in discussion with a group of the whistleblowers that are talking about wanting to get special protection for the whistleblowers, but also protect the experiencers. To not have people attacking them, insulting them, interfering with their careers and all that stuff. So that's actively underway right now at our New Paradigm Institute.
Understood. So if you had to recommend to people that start looking at this phenomenon where to look, I mean, there is 80 years of books
Sure.
and material all around, but how do you orient yourself? What is real and what is not real right now? What do you need to be wary of at this point, and what can
Well,
you trust?
I would put it in the positive that the first thing anybody who's listening here today, what you need to do if you want to be informed about this is you've got to get Richard Dolan, Dolan, his
Yeah,
2-volume work called UFOs and the National Security State. Okay. This has hundreds of documents attached to it in the appendices, through the footnotes, confirming through Freedom of Information Act documents that he's extracted, sometimes through litigation, extract them from the government, showing the details of the reality of this program. Okay. And that you will become kind of a walking expert on this. It's Richard Dolan's two
yeah,
volume work. So you can just go on Amazon or right now, Amazon Books, and just say Richard Dolan's at UFOs in the National Security State, order it and sit down and take a week off or your summer reading, at the beach,
yeah.
and read these things.
It's a
And
very
yeah, there's like two of them like this
yeah,
thick. And what it'll do is it'll make you at least subconsciously familiar with these different instances and the documents that exist. You'll see the letter, for example, from General Twining, who became the Air Force Chief of Staff. A letter where he says, these things are real. This is not fictitious. These are real. They're metallic craft. They're flying all around. This is a really serious issue. We're going to have to deal with it, and they have all of these documents that are in the book. That's bar none the most important single book to read, or
I agree. I agree with you. And those were among the first books I looked at when I started looking at this topic. But then today, crash recovery and reverse engineering is hot topic. What about then? I had the pleasure of talking to Paula Harris a few days ago.
Yes,
and of course, she's been working with Phil Corso for a long time.
That is
and
right.
Phil Corso was crash recovery, crash retrieval more than 20 years ago. What do you think about it? Is that story worth bringing back to the center of the conversation?
Yeah, he has two books, actually. He's got the book called The Day After Roswell, which he wrote, talking about his service in the position as the commander of the United States Pentagon on foreign materials. So, like, if we recover a Russian submarine or a jet fighter from North Korea, it was his job at the Pentagon to oversee the study of these foreign technology for potential weapons. It was in that capacity that he says in his book, The Day After Roswell, that he was put into possession of some of the technology that had been recovered from the Roswell crash, specifically. And he talks about it. There was a Kevlar vest, the night vision stuff, the what do you call it? Fiber optics, and all importantly, the silicon chip.
Yeah.
The silicon chip that is the root of our entire development of the computer age, came out of the craft at Roswell. Okay, so he talks about it, but he's got this other book that was in Italian. They barred it from being published here in the United States. But in this book, he talks about his own personal reflections on it, and very importantly, he's got a you'll be able to read that one, right? That's right there. That's it. Okay. So this is that other book that he's got, and it's much more detailed. And even though no one else has seen it, I mean, only a handful of people have seen it. Philip Corso left an 8mm home movie that he filmed. He just put it on a tripod and filmed this for his grandchildren to be shown to them only after he dies. Right?
Yep.
I've seen it. Right? And in it, he conveys to his grandchildren from the grave, as it were, that he back in 1945 had a direct face-to-face encounter with a UFO on the ground, and that a being came out of this cave that this craft had run into the heavy radar at Yucca Flats at White Sands Proving Ground, where we were getting ready to test the Trinity bomb.
Yeah.
Right. And that he had taken a lunch break and gotten a Jeep and gone out off the base, and he was in this little valley, and there was a UFO sitting right on the ground, and it had been brought down basically by the heavy radar, and a being came out of this cave. They were working on the craft, trying to get it to go again, and this ET being, according to Philip Corso, a telepathic communication to him, pleading with him to please get them to turn off the radar for just a couple of minutes so we can get out of here. Okay. Yeah. And Philip Corso did it. Okay. So that's a very dramatic thing. Philip Corso is an extremely credible source.
That was my question. I mean, you are an expert at evaluating testimonies. So you trust them.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
One of the side story of this, that based on Corso's telling the story, when Corso asked the being, "Why should I let you go?" and he was pointing his Beretta to him, Corso said, "What are you gonna give me?" And the being responded telepathically, "A new world if you can handle it."
Yeah. That's right. So that's Corso, So this is only the most important possible subject that anybody could be talking about right now. I mean, even though there's a threat of nuclear war, always there's war going on, and I don't mean to, diminish the importance of the war against Iran and the horrible stuff that's happened in Israel and in Gaza, and the horrible things going on in the Ukraine and Russia. I mean, Russia is losing 30,000 men killed every single month.
Yeah.
In the Ukraine has got 20,000 men being killed every single month. And we're all just going along, with our normal lives here. Well, all this is going on. This is so incongruous to the reality that is available to us by opening our minds and our hearts to the reality of the entire extraterrestrial civilization that surrounds us. I think it's absolutely essential for this kind of elevation of our consciousness, the expansion of our consciousness, of what the scope and scale of reality really is, and how completely incongruous it is to this reality for us to be engaging in these kind of activities against each other. That we need some kind of revelatory event to take place to shock our people into their senses. You
Yeah.
know, that's what I think the UFO disclosure is getting ready to be.
Yeah. It's incongruous, but at the same time, it seems that it's not an accident, that all these things are happening at the same time disclosure is happening.
That's right.
Uh, anyway, Danny, you've been very generous with your time. I would continue speaking to you for hours. There's so many things that I want to ask you, but hopefully we're gonna have another chance
We will.
in the
Absolutely.
future.
Absolutely.
The last thing is, how can people support your work, if
Ah,
there's any way to support it, and where
yeah,
people can find you? And I'll add
yeah,
all the details in the description of the video, etc., etc.
sure. Yeah, they should contact us at newparadigminstitute.org. Okay,
Okay.
newparadigminstitute.org, and they should sign up and become members of Citizens for Disclosure. Because it's primarily a United States based group to be able to influence the legislators here. The fact is, there are like half a dozen countries already that are organizing chapters of Citizens for Disclosure. I've spoken to the people in Finland. I've spoken to the people in Spain, at the conference over Zoom. And so this is important to go to the newparadigminstitute.org. Join Citizens for Disclosure. It's totally free. And what we'll be doing, we'll be sending newsletters to you like a couple times a week, keeping you updated on lots of things that are going on. They put in there a podcast that I do once every week, kind of doing a synopsis of what the events are that are going on in the world that relate to this whole thing. And then comparing and contrasting it to a lot of the other major news events that are going on. But come to newparadigminstitute.org, join the Citizens for Disclosure, and if you're disposed to doing so, you can become a member of the New Paradigm Institute. I think it's something like $5 a month or something. And like, for example, tomorrow evening, I have a meeting with 50 of the people that are actual members of the New Paradigm Institute. We have periodic meetings with smaller groups of them over the Zoom so they can ask questions and we can talk about it. So that there's an incentive to become a member of the New Paradigm Institute as well, if you're disposed to do so. But you can become a member of the Citizens for Disclosure totally for free, and we'll be sending you all kinds of material on how you organize and how you educate the people in your local community, your family and friends and people you work with, how you can share the information with them and have them stop calling you a nutcase because look at here, I told you so. Here's the information here now, so that's how they should get a hold of us. And I'm happy to talk with you whenever you'd like, Antonio.
Absolutely. And it was an absolute pleasure, really, Danny. Thank you very much for your time.
For me,
I hope to see you again also in person soon. Hope maybe the next Soul Foundation
sure.
Forum. I assume is going to be back in the US after last year's being in Italy.
I think so.
But yes, let's keep
We'll
in
see.
touch. Thank you,
Okay.
Danny. Good luck with the work that you're doing right now.
Fantastic.
for legislation.
Thank you. Terrific. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Something is Up is still at the very beginning, so every bit of support makes a huge difference in my ability to bring you more amazing stories and incredible guests. If you enjoy this conversation and feel called to support the channel, I'd be super grateful if you could just click the like and subscribe buttons and share the video with anyone you think might enjoy. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next episode.